So welcome viewers of the Tube. You are present at our very first video. You're with Mike and Grant. Mikey, how are you, fella?
Mikey's in the house. Great to see you, Grant. Yeah, welcome all our YouTube viewers and subscribers. We're really happy to have you on this journey with us as we talk everything from barbecues through to outer space and aliens. So we're here for you.
Yeah, like the description says, two blokes over a Zoom barbecue, straight talking, straight shooting. So this is our first episode or first podcast. Thought we might just talk about the election. So New Zealand, we're going to an election coming up October 17. So just under 4 weeks. So most people go, oh, elections, boring. But there are two referendum. One is binding and one isn't. And I thought, what better way to start our series up with a little chat around those two referendums and where we both sit with them and our thoughts. So what do you think, fella?
Yeah, I think it's great. So the two that you've chosen is cannabis legislation, and then there's the end of life choice.
There's actually a good reason why I chose those two.
Why is that?
Because they're the only two. So, first up, Legalise Cannabis. Now, there's been quite a bit written, quite a bit broadcast. There's really strong opinions. I've listened to, watched a few programs, etc. I have changed. I've been, pro to kind of give it a crime, and then a bunch of other stuff around, workplace safety, driving while under the influence, etc. So then I went no, and I watched a really good program where there was a lady and a guy there who really kind of explained it in a way or gave a perspective that I understood. And just recently on a show over here called Q&A, there was a really good panel discussion. So I'm going to put it right out there. I'm going to vote pro, and I'll explain why later. So what about you, mate?
I'm also voting pro, but it's I also agree with you around the whole workplace safety and driving and things. But I also think that there's a lot of benefits out there for people, with disabilities or in pain and just struggling and just that choice that you should be able to make if you're an adult. And there's some good positives as well. Where, the government, once they have a little bit more control over it, there's some good tax revenue for the country too. So yeah, I'll go for it. But yeah, some personal experience around workplace safety was I know of a company, and they had hired a young guy. He was only temporary, and he would come to work and he was just acting just that little bit odd, and he just couldn't get into the swing of things. You give him something to do, or you explain a way of doing something, and he was really away with the fairies, and just wasn't 100%. So just by that sort of experience alone, it makes me wary.
So speaking of personal experience, maybe we need to establish some credibility here. So the famous Bill Clinton question: have you ever smoked marijuana? Cannabis. Marijuana is the wrong term.
That's right. It is cannabis.
Yep.
It is cannabis. Yeah. So back in the when I first had my injury, back in the spinal unit days, I do remember sitting up at the top of the driveway with a few other inpatients, and we all had passed around the joint and had a bit of a puff, and it was definitely had a good sleep that night. And it was just something a little bit of an experiment, see how it would go. And so that's my experience. But since then, I haven't touched it, mainly because of the sport that I am in. Where if I was to take cannabis and we get drug tested, then I'd suffer a doping violation and be out of my sport.
And of course, you are still a high performance athlete despite all of this COVID up in the air nonsense. So you can be tested at any time, can't you? They just knock on your door and boom.
Yeah, well, whereas with cannabis, you can take it, or you can have THC out of competition. So there is information around there on being able to take that substance when you're not in competition. Everything should be all right, but there's still just that funny feeling that someone might just turn up, knock on your door, you've inhaled that drug, and that's the end of your career. Plus, it looks pretty bad as well. So no matter how you try to explain it.
Well, quite so bad if it's legalised. From my perspective, I'm going to come over goody two shoes here. I've never smoked, never had a joint. But then again, I've never smoked a cigarette. So no real surprise there. And for those people wondering, God, what's that weird all about? When I was young, maybe 6 or 7, mum and dad had a good old Vauxhall Velox with a bench seat in the front, and I was sitting between them. They were both smoking, and it was just awful. I asked them to stop, and they did. They never smoked again in the car. And I think that experience just kind of put me off. And as I got older, I just never, because I guess never experienced the drug side of it and the benefits, the nicotine. And let's face it, it is a drug. And it's got all sorts of properties to it. So I've never experienced that. So I guess never seen the upside. But all I could just think is it's like rolling up a $20 note and lighting it. It's just complete waste of money. And
yeah, I agree. My parents was quite heavy smokers as well, and as well as other members of my family. And I'd never smoked cigarettes, and I just couldn't. I could never understand it. It just does never interested me, and it was always quite horrible. So I remember sitting in the car many times on many journeys with my parents smoking, and I was, sitting in the back inhaling that secondhand smoke, which is pretty horrible.
There are a couple of, you touched on one of the points, but I reckon there's a couple of points there that I think the decision can hinge on a lot. One is kind of the economic benefits, and it's funny you should say that the government could tax it and get a fair bit of money out of it. Absolutely, they could. What's ironic is the Great Depression in '29, Roosevelt's New Deal, because there was prohibition, which was with the alcohol, etc. They legalized it, and the revenue they generated was one of the factors that helped them, get out of that, the depression. And it's kind of ironic. We're in this COVID time where there's all sorts of nonsense happening and economies in shambles, etc. And here is this massive revenue stream. So you got to say that's a potential. But the one that I really kind of struggle with, it's almost, I find it hypocrisy, and that's alcohol. So
yeah, I agree with you.
What the damage alcohol does. So I don't know, what do you think? Alcohol, cannabis?
Yeah, it's worse. I had a brother who's alcoholic, and many times I saw him, trying to battle those demons, and he was always getting himself in trouble. And it wasn't that he was a young person as well. He was quite an older person, and alcohol is the worst. So I find that quite difficult as well. I'm not a big alcohol drinker, and the fact that that's legal and can cause so much harm, whereas this doesn't cause, cannabis doesn't cause as much harm, and there's so many restrictions. But there's a big history that we can go into a little bit later on about it. How cannabis ended up being illegal and demonized, all from the paper and the hemp industry. That's where it's all come from. I just wonder if you wanted to talk through. We wanted me to talk through some of the things that are actually in the bill. The purpose is to reduce harm to people and communities. There's a few bullet points.
Yeah, let's go through them and a quick comment on each.
So yeah, the bill intends to reduce cannabis-related harm to individuals, families, and communities by providing access to legal cannabis to meet quality and potency requirements. So rather than just someone just growing in their backyard, there's some quality control. Eliminating illegal supply of cannabis.
So before you go on to the next one, so if we kind of use alcohol as the control there, so where does that differ from what alcohol does now? Can't see any difference. So not sure. So I would agree with that. Only in so much that there's, one's worse than the other, and it's not cannabis.
The next one was eliminating the illegal supply of cannabis.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. I mean, what was my first reaction in terms of why I was for was that if we could, if it wasn't illegal, then, if you've got gangs and the criminal fraternity who are making money using young people, they're stealing things, etc. You kind of, if it's legal, well, there's no criminal side. And I kind of think, if you give methamphetamine, which is well and truly overtaken cannabis in terms of a danger side, yeah, I think why wouldn't you? And like you said, quality. So,
it says that a person over 20 will be able to buy up to 14 grams of dried cannabis per day from licensed outlets, or grow up to 2 plants with a maximum of 4 plants per household. So that one thing that you touched on with methamphetamine is, though, this could be like the gateway drug. I hear a lot about that. The cannabis could be a gateway drug to worse drugs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I'd love to see research on it. I've heard that argument used a lot, and I just don't see it. I mean, 80%. I think the stat is 80% of New Zealanders have smoked cannabis at least once in their lives, and I don't. They haven't all gone on, and a lot of them still do. I know there's plenty of professionals out there, within the legal profession, doctors, a whole bunch of professionals who, given the right circumstance, just a wee joint, just to be sociable, and yet they aren't, high on cocaine or methamphetamine. Whereas if you look at methamphetamine, just one sample of that, and apparently that's all it needs, and then you're hooked. So yeah, I don't buy into that. That's a no for me.
There's also, with regards to the bill, raising awareness of the health risks associated with cannabis use. So there's going to be more information out there, more public awareness around that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but that's already started. They've already talking about decriminalising in terms of, so currently the police have this discretion as to whether they arrest or not. And I find that really interesting. Why, the police are there to, I heard the police association spokesman say this, the police are there to ensure that the law is complied with. It's not their job to figure out, does the law fit in terms of, is it the right law and should we apply it to this person? Sure, there's a level of discretion, but the law's the law. They're just there. Their job is to police it and to make sure it's carried out. And there's a massive shift towards all kinds of addictions, including methamphetamine at the upper end, being seen as a health issue and not a criminal issue. And I think that's a significant change.
There is restricting young people's access to cannabis. I can't really see that happening, considering young people can access it now.
Well, what's the difference in young people accessing alcohol? Again, surely it's about doing our best to raise children and highlighting the dangers, and then being there and supporting them through it. How long are we going to hold their hands through everything? I was 15 when I broke my neck. Well, I got that wrong, didn't I?
Limiting the public visibility of cannabis. So I'm not sure how the bill's going to do that.
I got no comment on that one.
So this is all the bill's purpose to reduce harm to people and communities, requiring health warnings on packaging at the time of purchase. Oh well, so it'd be along the same lines as cigarettes.
Yeah. Although you notice you don't pick up buy a nice bottle of wine and find drink
liver disease on it or something like that.
Drink 2 bottles of these and you're toast.
Yeah.
So
there's fetal alcohol syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the consistency?
Yeah, so they need to do something with that. improving access to health and social services and other kinds of support for families and whānau. So they might get that be able to pay for that out of the tax revenue.
That's already happening now. There's a big drive because it's linked with mental health issues. So that's already underway.
So making sure the response to any breach of law is fair. So currently at the moment, I think if you get caught with cannabis, the penalties are quite harsh considering, but the police do tend to use their own judgment nowadays.
And look, there's a lot of discussion around, is our criminal justice system racist? Māori and Pacific Islanders are overrepresented in this issue. And I think there are unconscious bias within the judicial system. But there's a lot of, I mean, that's very topical, and a lot is being done and worked through that. But it is, predominantly Māori who are really affected, particularly in rural areas. I'm thinking up north. And if it was legalised, I think we would see it really flourish in a good way, in a positive way.
So the bill also is there to control the production and supply of cannabis. So it's going to regulate how it is produced and supplied by limiting the amount of cannabis that's for sale at licensed places, controlling the potency, applying excise tax, which is what we talked about when a product is packaged and labelled for sale, setting up a licensing system under which all cannabis-related businesses must hold a license. So that's got to be good. Regulating location and trading hours, banning people from importing cannabis and allowing only licensed businesses to import seed, and then separating businesses that are licensed to grow cannabis and produce cannabis products from businesses that are licensed to operate premises. So there's some regulation there, but...
Look, I think most of it could be translated into one sentence. The government can make money out of this. And good on them, I mean, it was probably one of the greatest cases of user pays, really.
Yeah. So a little bit of watch this space, and maybe we can have a bit more of a chat about it next time.
I think the point there is that this of the two is the one that is not legally binding. So this could romp home by 80%, and then there would be no say. If the government decides not to, what I would like to see is it would go to a conscience vote probably, and they would look at these results, and if the public overwhelmingly said yes, then you'd like to see that reflected in what our politicians say.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, and just a little bit on that. So I spoke to Drug Free Sport last week around this whole referendum, and whether athletes would still be banned from their sport if they were to take cannabis and get tested for THC. And this is a huge thing at the moment, in the media and in the public opinion. So they're looking into it, but what they said they might do is you could still get tested for THC, but the punishment might not be as bad as perhaps other drugs. So yeah, we'll see.
There's lots of case studies overseas that people are looking at. So I'm sorry, this is a big tick for me on the ballot paper.
Cool, and same with me. So tell me about the next thing you want to talk about.
Yeah, so this is the end of life bill, and this is a binding referendum. So David Seymour from ACT, he's got a lot of profile. He really pushed this through. There was a lot of, it's a very polarizing topic, and there's some really strong opinions on both, both sides of the argument.
So it says here, that gives people with a terminal illness the option of requesting assisted dying.
Yeah, I think in looking at the strong argument for those people opposed to this bill is the risk that people with severe disabilities, people aren't really sure that it's open for abuse, and that we could see people having their lives ended when they didn't want them ended. The criteria to actually go through this seems pretty robust to me. It categorically says it doesn't apply to someone with a disability. And it is really about if, in the medical professional's opinion, you will die within 6 months, and that it be a pretty unpleasant death, i.e., lack of dignity, really. But I think the real issue here, or I think that people don't, on either side, don't really want to address, is that I think there's a religious side to it. I think people have strong religious beliefs and convictions about taking a life, and they just can't, or they struggle to reconcile it with their beliefs, which the majority are sincere beliefs, whether you agree with them or not. But they're not coming out and saying that, because then you get the whole Bible bashing and things, and it's statement. But I think underneath that, in the same way with abortion, which is, we won't even go there, there's a real strongly held beliefs. So
to be eligible for assisted dying, a person must meet all the following criteria. So they've got to be over 18 years, be a citizen or permanent resident of New Zealand, suffer from a terminal illness that's likely to end their life within 6 months, have significant and ongoing decline in physical capability, experience unbearable suffering that cannot be eased, be able to make an informed decision about assisted dying. So, a person will not be eligible to ask for assisted dying if the only reason they give is that they are suffering from a mental disorder or mental illness or disability of any kind, or are of advanced age. So, what do you think about that?
In what I've heard and read, it seems to me, I kind of found it almost ironic that by the time you've ticked all of those boxes, if you're within 6 months of dying, you're probably dead by the time you get the green light.
Yeah, there's a lot of assessments that you have to go through, and you've got to get a lot of opinions. And
I mean, you're not going to rock up to your GP and go, you know what, thanks, here's my diagnosis. Prognosis says 6 months. I'm out of here. I mean, that's just not going to fly. And I think the other safeguard is that the wishes of the family are not taken into consideration. And if we look at organ donation, which is that's something we should cover at some stage, it is possible for family to override in New Zealand the wishes of people who want to donate organs which are badly needed. But in this case, the family can't come in and say no, 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 and equally they can't come in and say yes, yes, yes. So it really is down to the person who has this terminal illness which isn't going to end well, with very little dignity.
Have you known anybody in that situation that could have benefited from this?
My dad got pancreatic cancer kind of really quick, kind of came out of nowhere, and I think almost from diagnosis to his death was probably 2 months max, and I watched him disintegrate in front of me from, a big strong man who never went to hospital. Saw his doctor, but he discussed golf instead of his goddamn pancreas. But anyway, so not pancreas. What's the male one? God, losing the plot. It'll come through. People watching, I've just had a slightly senior moment there. Prostate. Sorry, prostate.
Prostate,
yeah. I mean, prostate, pancreas, all the same. No, of course they're not. And if he really, but I won't go down that track. But when he realised just how bad it was, he just willed himself to die. Within a week, boom, he was gone. And he was, I guess, lucky that he could do that. But had it been around, I'd have certainly said, Dad, I don't want you to go, but you decide, fella. It's your life. And mainly, I think, from the dignity, led strong lives, and they've been and then you just see them just waste away. And
But he might not have even been eligible based on this process.
yeah, well,
Things going so fast.
Yeah. Well, because it went so fast, you didn't need the process. But the number of people who do, get these, cancers in particular, and they hang on, and it's horrific.
And there's cancer out there that, it can be managed, but the cost for the medication is out of people's, nobody can afford some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, costs should not be a factor in this at all, because we have really good palliative care within New Zealand. But surely it's your body, and if you decide that...
Well, look what we do for our pets and our animals, that we love. We never allow them to suffer. And yet humans, we watch them suffer and suffer.
Yeah, and look, it's really, this is binding. So if it's over 51%, boom, it's law. Simple as that. And, I've got to give David Seymour and his supporters real credit for getting across the line, because, it was a really passionate debate. There were some very strong submissions. I know they made a lot of compromises and changes and tweaks to appeal to everyone. And I think it was a conscience vote in the end. I'm pretty sure it was. But, we're grown-ups now. The country's evolved. Surely we can have this discussion. And then it's respect. It's called democracy. If 51% vote yes, then we respect that. If they vote no, we respect that. Surely that's what democracy is.
Yeah, so I'll be voting for this as well. And you? Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's a couple of pretty deep topics for our barbecue chat.
Yeah, and look, for those people that do watch us, they're not always going to be this deep, but we thought we'd just, while the sausages burn, we would demonstrate that we can think on a deeper, higher oxymoron.
We can, this just shows that we can be serious when we want
big issues. But don't worry, we got stories around aliens coming and some really freaky stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So for you guys out there just watching us, make sure that you click like to this video and future videos, and also put your comments down below, and Grant's going to review those, and I have a bit more common sense. I'll be a bit more careful, but he'll be reviewing those, taking your suggestions, and then passing them to me. So,
look, if someone wants to take the trouble to make a comment, so long as it's not some moronic, stupid comment, which will just, whatever. But if there is a sincere comment, what we're going to do is at the end of each one, we're going to pick a couple and just, give some feedback on that. And you know what? If you don't want to click the like button, don't click the like button. I know a lot of YouTubers, they want followings. We're just doing this because it's a bit of fun. So yeah, don't feel you got to click it. In fact, maybe we can make some record having no likes. That'll be fun.
It was great to talk to you, Grant.
It was a good chat, and I look forward to our next one.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers out there.